It was late October, right before Halloween. That time of year when the air smells like cold earth and burning leaves. I had just moved to a small town in Vermont for my first teaching job. It was quiet, peaceful, and exactly the kind of place you'd want to spend your fall evenings walking through orange fields and pumpkin patches. I never thought those same fields would make me afraid to look out my window at night. There was an old farm behind my rented house. The landlord told me it had been abandoned for nearly 20 years, but the field was still full of pumpkins, left to grow wild. Sometimes, when I stayed up late grading papers, I'd hear faint sounds from the fields. Footsteps crunching leaves, a soft humming, or what sounded like a small child laughing. I assumed it was kids from the neighborhood daring each other to sneak into the field at night, until I realized there were no kids living nearby. One evening, I decided to walk out there myself. The sunset was fading behind the hills, and the air smelled like dirt and rain. The wind pushed the tall, dying corn around me, whispering like 100 quiet voices. That's when I saw him. A boy, maybe 8 or 9 years old, standing between the rows of pumpkins. His clothes were filthy, torn at the sleeves, and his hair was matted with mud. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at me. I called out to him, "Hey, are you lost?" He tilted his head, just slightly, like a confused dog. That's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. He wasn't standing on the ground. His shoes were a few inches above it. His shadow stretched the wrong way across the dirt. Then he smiled. It wasn't the smile of a kid. It was slow, deliberate, like he was remembering how to do it. And then he whispered something, too softly for me to make out, but the voice didn't come from his mouth. It came from behind me. I turned, but there was no one there. When I looked back, the boy was gone. The only thing left was a small, freshly carved pumpkin sitting where he'd been standing, still warm to the touch. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that whisper again, faint, childlike, but too close. The next morning, I told my landlord about the boy. She went pale. Then she said, "You shouldn't have gone in that field." Apparently, years ago, a boy had gone missing during the town's harvest festival. His parents owned that farm. They found his body weeks later, right where the pumpkins still grow today. I moved out by the end of the month. But sometimes, when I see pumpkins in the fall, especially the ones that look freshly carved, I swear I can still hear a voice whispering from behind me. "Do you remember me, teacher?" This happened about 15 years ago, during the fall of 2009. I was 17 then, living in a small town called New Braunfels, Texas. It's one of those quiet places where the streets go dark by 9 p.m., and the air always smells faintly of cedar and smoke once the weather starts to cool. It was fall break, cold evenings, leaves turning rust red and orange, and that damp chill in the air that seeps through your hoodie. My best friend Sarah and I were bored out of our minds one night. Everything in town was closed, and there's only so much late-night TV you can watch before you start to lose it. So around midnight, we decided to just drive out to the park near the river. It was stupid, I know, but it was our little hangout spot. Quiet, peaceful, and in the fall, it looked almost beautiful with the dim yellow lights reflecting off piles of leaves. At first, it felt calm, safe, even. We sat on the swings, talking about random stuff, school, music, who liked to, just regular teenage things. The park was completely empty, and the sound of the wind rustling through the trees made everything feel still. But the thing about peaceful nights like that is, they can turn wrong in a second. After maybe an hour, we were getting ready to leave. The cold had started to bite, and the swings creaked louder as the wind picked up. The street lights along the path kept flickering. One would blink out for a few seconds, then buzz back to life. That's when I noticed something. There was a shape at the far end of the park, on top of one of the picnic tables. At first, I thought it was just a shadow, or maybe a stray dog, but it wasn't moving like an animal. It was crouched, completely still. And I mean crouched on top of the table, not sitting, not standing, just perched, like how a bird or a cat would balance before jumping. Sarah noticed too. She whispered, "Do you see that?" I nodded, staring at it. The park lamps around that side were dim, so I couldn't make out much detail, just the silhouette of someone hunched over, facing our direction. For a few minutes, we just stared, half expecting it to move or stand up. But it didn't. It stayed like that, completely motionless. Then the smell hit us, like wet metal and old meat. The wind carried it straight toward us. I remember my stomach tightening. I told Sarah maybe it was a homeless person or some drunk guy and we should just leave. But she whispered, "Look closer." So I did. When my eyes adjusted, I realized the shape wasn't right. The shoulders, they were too wide. The arms were bent at odd angles, and something was folded behind it. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, but when it shifted, just slightly, I saw it clear as day. There were wings. The next few seconds are burned into my brain like a nightmare I can't wake from. The thing tilted its head, not like a person, but like a predator sizing you up. Its neck moved slow, mechanical. Then, out of nowhere, this scream ripped through the air. I've heard people scream before, at football games, concerts, even in fear, but this wasn't human. It was high-pitched, ragged, like the sound of metal tearing combined with a woman shrieking. Sarah clamped her hands over her ears. I froze. I wanted to move, but my legs wouldn't respond. Then it stood up. Even from across the park, I could tell it was huge, maybe 7 or 8 feet tall. It didn't stand like a person either. Its limbs were too long, too thin, and those wings, they weren't feathery. They looked wet, like stretched leather glinting in the streetlight. That broke the spell. We both ran. I don't even remember grabbing my phone or car keys. We just ran until our chests burned. The whole time, I could hear something, either wings flapping or branches snapping above us. I honestly couldn't tell. We started banging on doors, begging people to let us in. Nobody did. A few shouted threats about having guns. One porch light flicked on and off, but no one came out. Eventually, we called 911 from Sarah's phone. The dispatcher thought we were drunk or high, but they sent a patrol anyway. When the cops showed up, they tried explaining, shaking, crying, still out of breath. One officer, a younger Mexican guy, kept asking if maybe we'd seen a large bird, but the older one, he didn't say much. He just kept glancing toward the tree line, like he was waiting to see something. They drove Sarah home first. I walked the rest of the way since my house was only a few blocks down. The streets were empty, just the wind scraping through the dry leaves. When I finally got inside, I locked every door and window. I couldn't sleep, not because of what I saw, but because of something the younger cop said before leaving. He leaned in and whispered, "If you ever see it again, don't look up." 15 years later, I still don't go near that park after dark. Every fall, when the nights get colder and the air smells like rain and smoke again, I swear sometimes I hear that same scream, faint, somewhere above the trees. And I don't look up. It was late October, the kind of fall night where the air smells like wood smoke and wet leaves, and the streets glow amber under flickering streetlights. I was doing my usual Thursday shift for a local food delivery app. Most nights were quiet. Grab the food, drive, drop it off, and move on. It wasn't glamorous, but the cool evenings and empty roads made it feel peaceful, almost therapeutic. I remember that night clearly, because the playlist in my car was all mellow fall music, acoustic guitars, soft drums, and for a while, everything felt calm. Around 8:30 p.m., just after finishing a delivery downtown, I got a new order notification. Sushi, prepaid, about 20 minutes out toward the suburbs. The name didn't ring a bell, but the address looked normal. No apartment code, no strange instructions. Easy money, I thought. I picked up the food, tucked it into the insulated bag, and set off. The radio played quietly as the city lights faded behind me. The further I drove, the quieter it got. No traffic, just the hum of the tires and the occasional gust of wind sweeping piles of orange leaves across the road. A few minutes into the drive, I noticed a pair of headlights behind me. They weren't tailgating, just following. When I turned, they turned. When I slowed down, they slowed too. It could have been a coincidence, but on that empty stretch of road, it felt intentional. I changed lanes twice, hoping they'd pass. They didn't. The SUV stayed exactly 3 car lengths behind me. I remember gripping the wheel tighter, trying to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe they lived in the same direction. Maybe I was just being paranoid. By the time I reached the suburbs, the roads were nearly deserted. The neighborhood was quiet. Big trees, dim porch lights, and driveways littered with damp leaves. The kind of place where sound doesn't travel far. I turned into the street listed on the order, and that's when I noticed the SUV didn't follow me in. It kept driving straight, disappearing down the hill. I felt stupid for being scared. I even laughed a little as I parked in front of the address. It was a small, single-story house with a weak porch light and wind chimes swaying gently in the breeze. A pumpkin sat by the steps, half collapsed and dark from rain. I grabbed the sushi bag, walked up the narrow path, and rang the bell. After a few seconds, the door opened. An elderly woman in a faded robe, her gray hair pulled back. She looked tired and confused. "I didn't order anything," she said firmly. I checked the receipt. Address matched exactly. "It's prepaid," I told her. "Maybe someone else in the house." "There's no one else here," she interrupted, her voice trembling slightly. "You've got the wrong place." Something about the way she looked past me instead of at me made my stomach twist. I apologized, said there must have been a mix-up, and started walking back to my car. That's when I saw the SUV again. It was parked sideways across the driveway, blocking my exit. Its headlights were off, but I could see 3 silhouettes standing beside it. They weren't rushing toward me. They were just standing there, watching. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves around my feet. My heart hammered so hard I could hear it in my ears. I didn't think. I just ran. I bolted past the side of the house and into the backyard, clutching my phone. Behind me, I heard footsteps and muffled voices. Male, calm but purposeful. They split up. One came around the side, another through the yard. The grass was slick, and the air smelled like wet dirt and decaying leaves. I ducked behind a shed, my breath fogging in the cold air. I tried calling 911, but my hands were shaking too much to hit the right buttons. When I finally got through, I whispered everything I could. The fake order, the SUV, the men. The dispatcher told me to stay hidden. I could hear the men getting closer, crunching leaves, snapping twigs. One of them called out low and mocking, "We just want to talk, man." Every muscle in my body locked up. I stayed perfectly still until, eventually, the voices began to fade. A few minutes later, I heard an engine start, then silence. When the police arrived, I crawled out from behind the shed, my clothes soaked and knees muddy. 2 officers searched the area with flashlights. My car was gone, the sushi bag too. The SUV had vanished. The officers explained there had been reports of fake delivery orders across nearby towns. Drivers lured to quiet homes, robbed, sometimes attacked. The scammers used stolen credit cards, and the addresses always belonged to elderly people who deny ordering anything. They told me I was lucky. That word stuck with me, lucky. It's been months since that night, but every time I drive home after sunset and see an SUV in my mirror, I still feel my chest tighten. Sometimes I take random turns just to be sure I'm not being followed. And last week, this is the part that's been eating at me. I got a new delivery request through a different app. Prepaid, no instructions. Same sushi place, same address. I didn't accept it. But I checked the app again a few minutes later, and the order was gone. Someone else had picked it up.